Welcome to Children Who Changed How We Live. Tonight, I want to share a story that began with a simple observation from a boy who saw what others had missed. In a hospital where everyone ate alone, in their rooms, in silence, in isolation, 9-year-old Noah noticed something profound. Loneliness was its own kind of illness. And he had a cure. He didn't ask for medicine or treatment. He asked for a table. Not just any table. A large wooden table in the hallway where everyone could gather, not to eat, but to be together. Even if we don't talk, he said. Just to be near each other. This is not a story about dying. It is a story about how one child's simple request transformed an entire hospital wing, from a place of isolation into a community of shared presence. How a table became more than furniture. It became a sanctuary, a meeting place, a family. Find a quiet moment. Let your breath slow, and allow these words to meet you exactly where you are, whether you carry loneliness today, or simply need to remember that we are never meant to walk alone. Because sometimes the most radical healing doesn't come from medicine. It comes from sitting beside someone and sharing the same air. The window in room 11 faced east, catching the morning sun before anywhere else in the hospital. This was not an accident of architecture, but a deliberate choice made decades earlier by a hospital administrator who believed that children facing difficult days deserved to see the dawn first. The light that poured through those panes each morning was different from the light in other rooms, softer, more forgiving, as if the sun itself understood the fragility of what unfolded behind this particular glass. It fell in golden pools across the floorboards, illuminated dust motes dancing like tiny spirits, and warmed the wooden windowsill where 8-year-old Oliver now sat arranging the artifacts of his childhood. He had asked for them the week before, not as a sudden impulse, but as a quiet necessity that had been growing in him like a root seeking water. His mother, Rebecca, had arrived one evening with a cardboard box that had once held his winter boots but now contained the entire landscape of his early years. Inside lay Barnaby, a teddy bear whose fur had been loved to patches of bare fabric at the ears and paws goodnight moon, the board book whose pages he had chewed as a teething infant and whose illustrations he could still recite from memory, a set of wooden alphabet blocks, their letters worn smooth by small hands learning to spell a tiny blue sneaker, the mate long lost to time, that had once fit his foot when he was 2, and a smooth grey stone he had picked up from the creek behind their house. On his 5th birthday, declaring it the best treasure ever. Oliver did not arrange these items randomly. He placed them with the care of a curator arranging sacred objects in a museum. Barnaby sat propped against the wall, one paw resting on the windowsill as if holding court. Goodnight moon lay open to the page with the old lady whispering hush, its colors faded but still vibrant enough to transport him back to bedtime rituals of long ago. The alphabet blocks spelled out his name in wobbly capitals. Oliver. The tiny blue sneaker stood upright beside them, a monument to feet that had once been small enough to fit inside. And the grey stone rested in the center of it all, catching the morning light like a miniature moon. "This is my window to childhood," he told his mother when she asked what he was doing. Rebecca had expected sentimentality, perhaps nostalgia for a time before illness had narrowed his world to these 4 walls. But what she saw in her son's eyes was something different, not longing for the past, but connection to it. A recognition that the boy he had been still lived inside the boy he was now, like rings within a tree trunk, each layer supporting the next. "When I look at them," Oliver explained, his voice soft but precise, "I remember that I was small once. And that being small wasn't scary. It was just being. And I understand that I'm still that boy. I've just grown around him." Rebecca felt something shift deep in her chest, a loosening of a knot she had not even known she carried. She had spent months watching her son's body grow weaker, his movements slower, his world smaller. She had grieved the loss of the boy who had once run through their backyard chasing fireflies, who had climbed trees with the fearless confidence of childhood, who had believed he could build castles tall enough to touch the sky. But Oliver was teaching her something fundamental about identity: that we do not lose our younger selves as we grow. We carry them with us, like seeds within fruit, waiting for the right conditions to sprout again. That evening, as sunset painted the room in hues of rose and gold, Oliver asked his mother to tell him a story about one of the objects on his windowsill. Not just any story, a specific memory tied to that object, a moment when it had been more than just a thing. "Tell me about Barnaby," he said, his gaze resting on the worn teddy bear. And so Rebecca began. She told him about the night he was 3 and had woken screaming from a nightmare about monsters under his bed. She had held him until his breathing slowed, then placed Barnaby in his arms and told him that teddy bears were specially trained to guard against monsters. "Barnaby has super hearing," she had told her terrified son. "He can hear monsters coming from a mile away. And he has super strength. He can push them right out the window if they try to come near." Oliver had clutched Barnaby to his chest that night, his small fingers digging into the bear's worn fur, and fallen asleep with a sense of security that no amount of parental reassurance could have provided. The next morning, he had announced to his father at breakfast, "Barnaby kept the monsters away. He's the bravest bear in the whole world." Rebecca told this story not with the condescension adults sometimes use when recounting childhood fears, but with the reverence of someone witnessing a profound truth. That love often wears the disguise of simple objects, and that a child's faith in a teddy bear's protective powers is as real and powerful as any adult belief system. Oliver listened with his eyes closed, his breathing slow and even, his small hands resting on the blanket as if holding onto the words physically. When his mother finished, he did not speak immediately. He simply sat in the quiet room, the story settling into him like a seed finding fertile soil. Then he whispered, "I remember that night. I remember thinking Barnaby was real. Not just a toy. A friend." And Rebecca understood that this was not nostalgia. This was preservation. Each story was a vessel carrying a piece of who Oliver had been, and who he still was, beneath the illness. Each retelling was an act of love that refused to be erased by time or circumstance. The ritual began that evening and continued each night thereafter. Oliver would choose an object from his windowsill, and his mother, or sometimes his father, William, who arrived each evening smelling of sawdust and fresh air from his woodworking shop, would tell a story about it. Some stories were joyful. The afternoon Oliver had built a tower of alphabet blocks so tall it had toppled over and sent letters scattering across the living room floor like confetti the morning he had insisted on wearing the tiny blue sneaker on his wrong foot because it feels better this way, the day he had presented the grey stone to his mother with the solemnity of a king offering a scepter, declaring it the most important thing I've ever found. Some stories were tender. The night Oliver had fallen asleep on the couch with goodnight moon open on his chest, his small fingers still clutching the page with the kittens playing with a ball of yarn the afternoon he had cried when Barnaby's ear had torn during a particularly enthusiastic game of tea party, and William had spent an hour carefully sewing it back on while Oliver watched with rapt attention the moment he had whispered "I love you" unprompted to the grey stone after a difficult day at preschool, as if understanding that sometimes the deepest emotions need the simplest vessels. And some stories were quiet. So quiet they might have seemed insignificant to anyone else, but to the family gathered in room 11 each evening, they contained entire universes of meaning. The way Oliver always put his shoes on the wrong feet when he was in a hurry. The particular cadence of his laugh when he was trying not to wake the baby next door. The way he would hum while drawing, a tuneless melody that was entirely his own. These were the details that defined him, not the diagnosis, not the treatments, not the slow erosion of his body's capabilities. These were the truths that illness could not touch. William brought his own stories to the collection, memories Rebecca had not witnessed but that enriched their shared narrative. He told Oliver about the time he had fallen asleep in the car after a long day at the zoo, his head lolling against the window, his mouth slightly open in perfect peace. He told him about the afternoon Oliver had tried to help him fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom, handing him tools with solemn concentration and declaring himself Daddy's best assistant. He told him about the evening Oliver had sat beside him on the porch swing, not speaking, just watching fireflies blink their coded messages in the gathering dark, and William had felt a connection so profound it had brought unexpected tears to his eyes. These stories were not performed for an audience. They were not recorded or transcribed, though Rebecca sometimes wished they could be preserved exactly as spoken. They existed only in the space between family members, in the warmth of the bedside lamp casting long shadows across the wall, in the gentle rhythm of Oliver's breathing as he drifted towards sleep. They were ephemeral by nature, spoken into existence each evening and then released, like dandelion seeds carried on the wind. But their impermanence did not diminish their power. If anything, it heightened it. Each story was a gift offered freely, received gratefully, and then allowed to become part of the fabric of their shared history. The nurses who worked the evening shift began to recognize the ritual. They would pause their rounds when passing room 11, listening for the soft cadence of Rebecca's or William's voice weaving stories into the quiet air. Some would stand just outside the door for a moment, their own hearts softened by the tenderness of what they overheard. Nurse Clara, who had worked pediatrics for 20 years and believed she had heard every kind of love story the human heart could produce, found herself lingering longer than necessary during medication checks, not to monitor vitals but to absorb the quality of attention in that room. She had seen families torn apart by grief, parents paralyzed by fear, children angry at a world that had betrayed them. But she had rarely witnessed what existed in room 11 each evening. A love so deliberate, so intentional, that it seemed to generate its own light. One night, after Rebecca had finished telling the story of Oliver's first day of kindergarten, how he had clung to her hand until the last possible moment, then turned and walked into the classroom without looking back, his small backpack bouncing against his shoulders, Clara had entered to check Oliver's for. She had expected to find him asleep, as usual. Instead, she found him awake, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "That was a good one," he had said softly. Clara had nodded, her throat too tight for words. She had adjusted his pillow, checked the drip rate, made notes on his chart. But as she turned to leave, Oliver had spoken again. "Will you tell your son that story someday?" he had asked. Clara had frozen. Her son was 32, living across the country, a successful architect who rarely called and never visited. Their relationship had become a series of polite text messages and obligatory birthday cards. Clara had not told anyone at work about her son, not because she was ashamed, but because the distance between them felt like a failure she could not articulate. "I don't know," she had answered honestly. Oliver had considered this for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the ceiling where shadows from the oak tree outside danced in the evening breeze. "Stories are like seeds," he had said finally. "You plant them even if you don't know if they'll grow. Sometimes they just need time." Clara had left the room without responding. But the next morning, for the first time in 5 years, she had called her son. She had not asked for anything. She had not complained or sought reconciliation. She had simply said, "I was thinking about the day you started kindergarten. Do you remember how you wouldn't let go of my hand?" And her son, after a long silence, had whispered, "I remember everything." The ritual continued through autumn and into winter. Oliver's body grew weaker. Some days he could not lift his head from the pillow. Some nights pain required medication that left him drifting between worlds before his parents could begin their story. But on the days when clarity returned, he still asked for the stories. And his parents still told them. not as a duty, but as a privilege. Each evening they arrived with a specific memory tucked carefully in their hearts, like a treasure they had been saving for this exact moment. They told him about the time he had tried to teach the family cat to fetch. The cat had been unimpressed but tolerant. They told him about the afternoon they had gotten caught in a sudden rainstorm while walking home from the library, and instead of running for shelter, they had danced in the downpour until they were soaked to the bone and laughing so hard they could barely breathe. They told him about the morning he had woken Rebecca before dawn to watch the sunrise, declaring it the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, a phrase he had repeated so often it had become their private mantra for moments of unexpected beauty. And Oliver listened. Not passively, but actively, absorbing each word, each detail, each emotion until the story became part of him. Sometimes he would add his own details to the narrative, small things his parents had forgotten or never noticed. "I was scared," he would say softly after Rebecca finished the first day of kindergarten story. "But I didn't want you to know." Or, "The rain got in my eyes and it stung, but I didn't cry because I was having too much fun." These additions were not corrections. They were gifts, pieces of his inner world offered freely to enrich their shared history. And his parents would listen with the same reverence they had shown while telling the stories, understanding that this exchange was as much a part of the ritual as the telling itself. One evening in late November, as the first snow of the season began to fall outside the window, Oliver asked for a story his parents had not prepared. "Tell me about the day I was born," he said. Rebecca and William had hesitated. This was not a story they had planned to tell, not because it was painful, but because it felt too intimate, too raw. The memory was still vivid after 8 years. The long hours of labor, the moment Rebecca had first held her son, small and perfect and screaming with the indignity of being born, the way William had wept when he saw them together, the overwhelming certainty that their lives had been irrevocably changed in the best possible way. This was not just a story. It was the origin of everything. But Oliver was watching them with those thoughtful eyes, and they understood that he was not asking for clinical details or sentimental cliches. He was asking for the truth of his beginning, the moment he had entered the world and, in doing so, had entered their hearts. So Rebecca began. She told him about the hospital room with its view of the parking lot, not picturesque, but somehow perfect in that moment. She told him about the nurse who had hummed old folk songs while checking her vitals. She told him about William pacing the hallway like a caged animal until the doctor had finally allowed him back into the room. She told him about the exact moment she had first held him, how impossibly small he had been, how his fingers had curled around hers with a grip that belied his fragility, how his cries had gradually softened into contented sighs as he nursed for the first time. She told him about the way the morning light had streamed through the blinds when he finally fell asleep on her chest, painting stripes of gold across his tiny face. She told him about the overwhelming certainty that had settled in her heart as she watched him sleep. This child would change everything. And he had. When she finished, the room was silent except for the soft hiss of the oxygen machine and the distant hum of the hospital at night. Oliver's eyes were closed, but a single tear traced a path down his temple and disappeared into the pillow. Rebecca reached out and brushed his hair from his forehead, her fingers lingering on his skin as if memorizing its texture. "Thank you," he whispered. And in that moment, Rebecca and William understood something fundamental about their ritual. It was not just about preserving memories of who Oliver had been. It was about affirming who he still was, a beloved son, a cherished story, a light that would continue to shine long after his body had returned to the earth. Each story was a thread weaving him into the fabric of their family's history, ensuring that he would never be forgotten, never erased, never reduced to a diagnosis or a tragedy. He was Oliver, their son, a boy who had loved teddy bears and alphabet blocks and dancing in the rain. And that truth would outlast everything else. Winter deepened around the hospital, wrapping the building in a blanket of snow that muffled sound and softened edges. The oak tree outside Oliver's window stood bare against the grey sky, its branches etched like delicate calligraphy against the winter light. Inside room 11, the ritual of stories continued, though the space between them grew longer as Oliver's strength waned. Some evenings his parents arrived to find him already asleep, his breathing shallow but steady, his face peaceful in a way that broke their hearts and healed them simultaneously. On those nights they would sit beside him anyway, their hands resting lightly on his, and tell their story silently, whispering the words into the quiet air where they would wait for him to hear them in his dreams. But on the nights when he was awake, the stories grew deeper, more nuanced. Rebecca and William began telling not just about Oliver's milestones and adventures, but about the quiet moments that had shaped him, the way he always shared his dessert with the dog even when he was hungry himself, the particular concentration he brought to building block towers, his tongue poking slightly from the corner of his mouth, his brow furrowed in determination, the way he would pause mid-sentence when telling a story to consider his words carefully, as if each one mattered too much to be chosen carelessly. These were the details that defined him, not the grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the small, consistent choices that revealed his character. And as his parents spoke them aloud each evening, they felt themselves falling in love with their son all over again. Not the son illness was stealing from them, but the son who had always existed beneath the surface of symptoms and treatments. William brought his woodworking projects to the hospital on weekends, setting up a small folding table by the window where he could work while Oliver napped or listened to his mother's stories. He was building a rocking horse, a project he had started months earlier, intending it as a gift for a friend's new baby. But as the weeks passed and the horse took shape under his hands, he realized he was not building it for anyone else. He was building it for Oliver. Not because Oliver would ever ride it. William knew that truth with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, but because the act of creation was its own form of love. Each curve of the horse's neck, each carefully sanded edge, each tiny hoof carved with painstaking precision was a prayer offered without words. A hope. A promise that beauty could still exist even in the midst of loss. Oliver watched his father work with the quiet fascination of someone who understood that some things matter not for their utility but for their intention. He did not ask questions about the project. He did not request updates or express impatience for its completion. He simply observed, the way William's hands moved with a confidence that belied the turmoil in his eyes, the way sawdust collected in the lines of his palms like gold dust, the way his breathing slowed and deepened when he was fully absorbed in his work. And sometimes, when William looked up from sanding a particularly stubborn edge, he would find Oliver watching him with an expression of such pure love that it felt like a physical touch. One afternoon in January, during a rare pain-free hour when the winter sun streamed through the window in thick golden beams, William set aside his tools and sat beside Oliver's bed. "Tell me a story," he said softly. Oliver looked at him, surprised. It was always Rebecca or William who told the stories. Oliver listened, he nodded, he sometimes added his own details, but he had never been the storyteller. Yet something in his father's gaze, the vulnerability there, the quiet plea, made Oliver understand that this request was not about entertainment or distraction. It was about connection. So Oliver began. Not with a story about himself, but with a story about his father. He told William about the day he had learned to tie his shoes, a memory William had forgotten but Oliver had carried with him like a treasure. He described the exact spot on the living room floor where they had sat, the patch of carpet worn thin by years of foot traffic, the particular shade of blue in William's work shirt that day, the way his father's hands had been so gentle despite their size and strength, the patience in his voice as he demonstrated the bunny ears method over and over until Oliver's small fingers finally understood the motion. He told William about the pride he had seen in his father's eyes when he finally succeeded, not the loud, celebratory pride of accomplishment, but the quiet, deep pride of witnessing growth. And he told William something he had never said aloud before. That was the day I knew you would always teach me things. Not just how to tie shoes, but how to be brave, how to be kind, how to keep trying even when things are hard. William had not cried. Men of his generation, raised to believe that strength meant stoicism, rarely allowed themselves that release. But his eyes had grown bright with unshed tears, and his hand had trembled slightly as he reached out to squeeze Oliver's shoulder. "Thank you," he had whispered, his voice thick with emotion he could not name. And in that moment, the ritual expanded. It was no longer just Rebecca and William telling stories to Oliver. It was a circle of storytelling, each person offering their memories, their truths, their love in the form of words carefully chosen and freely given. Oliver began bringing his own stories to the evening ritual, memories of his parents that he had not shared before, observations about their habits and quirks that revealed how deeply he had been paying attention all these years. He told Rebecca about the way she always hummed while cooking dinner, a habit she had not even realized she had. He told William about the particular way he would tilt his head when listening intently to someone speak, as if giving his full attention was the most important thing in the world. These stories were gifts, not just to his parents, but to Oliver himself, who found in their telling a healing he had not known he needed. The nurses noticed the change in room 11. It was not just the stories themselves, though those were beautiful in their own right. It was the quality of attention in the room, the way Rebecca and William listened to Oliver with the same reverence they showed while telling their own stories, the way Oliver absorbed each word as if it were a lifeline, the way the space between them seemed to hum with a love so palpable it felt like a physical presence. Nurse Clara began bringing other families to the doorway of room 11, not to intrude, but to witness. "Watch how they love each other," she would whisper to parents struggling with their own grief. "Not perfectly, not without pain, but deliberately, intentionally. That's what matters." One mother, whose daughter had been in room 9 for 6 months and who had spent most of that time paralyzed by fear and anger, stood outside room 11 one evening and listened to Rebecca tell the story of Oliver's first snowman. She heard the joy in Rebecca's voice, the tenderness in her descriptions, the way she did not shy away from the messy details, the wet gloves, the cold noses, the argument over whether the snowman needed a scarf. And something shifted in her, not a dramatic transformation, but a quiet loosening of the knot of fear that had been tightening in her chest for months. The next evening, she sat beside her daughter's bed and asked, "Tell me about your favorite toy when you were little." And her daughter, who had not spoken in days, had opened her eyes and whispered, "My rabbit. His name was Hoppy." The ritual was spreading, not as a program or intervention, but as a quiet contagion of love. Families throughout the East Wing began creating their own evening rituals. A father in room 12 started reading poetry to his son each night, not children's poems but the works of Mary Oliver and Wendell Berry, poems about nature and mortality and the beauty of ordinary moments. A mother in room 5 began bringing photographs from home and telling stories about the people in them, connecting her daughter to a family history that illness had threatened to sever. A grandfather in room 15 taught his grandson how to fold origami cranes, each one representing a hope or a memory or a prayer. These rituals were not identical to the one in room 11. They were unique to each family, shaped by their own histories and personalities and needs. But they shared a common thread: the deliberate choice to focus not on what was being lost, but on what remained. Not on the future that might never come, but on the present that was still available. Not on illness, but on love. Rebecca noticed the change in the wing's atmosphere. The evenings felt different, not lighter, exactly, but softer. Less sharp around the edges. Families still grieved. Children still suffered. The reality of their situations had not changed. But something in how they moved through that reality had shifted. They were learning to hold both joy and sorrow simultaneously, to acknowledge the pain of their circumstances without allowing it to eclipse the beauty of their connections. And Rebecca understood that this was Oliver's gift, not just to their family, but to everyone who had witnessed their ritual and been inspired to create their own. One evening in February, during what might have been called the hour of stories that heal, Oliver asked Rebecca to tell him a story she had never told before. "Tell me about a time I made you proud," he said softly. Rebecca had hesitated. There were so many times, too many to count. The day he had stood up to a bully at school, not with fists but with words. The afternoon he had comforted a friend who had fallen off the swings, sharing his ice cream without being asked. The morning he had woken her before dawn to watch the sunrise, declaring it the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But as she searched her memory for the right story, one rose to the surface, not because it was dramatic or unusual, but because it contained a truth about her son that she wanted him to carry with him always. She told him about the time he was 6 and they had been walking home from a park when they passed a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk with a cardboard sign. Most people had walked past without making eye contact, but Oliver had stopped. He had not said anything. He had simply reached into his pocket, pulled out the granola bar his mother had packed for his snack, and handed it to the man. Then he had smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, and said, "I hope you have a good day." The man had been so surprised he had not known how to respond. He had simply nodded, his eyes glistening with tears he would not allow to fall. And Oliver had taken Rebecca's hand and continued walking home, as if he had not just performed an act of profound kindness. "I didn't say anything at the time," Rebecca told her son now, her voice soft with memory. "I didn't want to make it into a lesson or a moment. But that night, after you were asleep, I cried. Not because I was sad. Because I was so proud of the person you were becoming. You didn't give that man your snack because you thought you should. You didn't do it to make me proud or to get praise. You did it because you saw someone who needed help, and you had something to give. That's who you are, Oliver. That's always been who you are." Oliver had listened with his eyes closed, his breathing slow and even. When Rebecca finished, he had not responded immediately. He had simply lain there in the quiet room, the story settling into him like a seed finding fertile soil. Then he had whispered, "I remember that day. I remember thinking he looked lonely. And I thought maybe the granola bar would help. But mostly I thought he needed someone to see him." And Rebecca had understood that her son had always known what so many adults spend lifetimes learning. That the greatest gift we can offer another person is not our solutions or our resources or our advice. It is our attention. Our willingness to see them, to truly see them, and to acknowledge their humanity with our own. The winter months passed slowly, each day measured not in hours but in stories. Oliver's body continued its gradual journey toward stillness, but his spirit seemed to grow stronger with each passing evening. He began requesting specific stories, not randomly, but with intention. "Tell me about the time we danced in the rain," he would say on a day when pain had been particularly sharp. "Tell me about the day I learned to ride my bike," he would request on a night when fear had threatened to overwhelm him. He was using the stories as anchors, touchstones to remind him of who he was beneath the illness, of the joy and courage and love that had defined his life before diagnosis and would continue to define it after. And his parents understood that this was not escapism. This was resistance. A quiet, deliberate refusal to allow illness to be the final word on his existence. One evening in late March, as the first hints of spring began to appear outside the window, a single crocus pushing through the snow, a bird returning to the oak tree's bare branches, Oliver asked for a story Rebecca and William had been saving. "Tell me about the future," he said. Rebecca and William had frozen, their hands hovering over the blanket. The future was a territory they had carefully avoided in their stories, not out of fear, exactly, but out of respect for the present moment. They had focused on the past because the past was certain. The future was not. And yet, here was Oliver, asking for it anyway. "What do you want to know?" William had asked carefully. Oliver had considered this for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the ceiling where shadows from the oak tree danced in the evening breeze. "Tell me about the person I'll become," he had said finally. "Not the sick person. The real me. The one who stays." And Rebecca and William had understood. He was not asking for predictions or fantasies. He was asking for assurance, proof that his essence, his spirit, his love would not disappear when his body did. So they began to tell him about the future, not as a place he would go, but as a presence he would leave behind. They told him about the way his laughter would echo in the memories of his friends, about the kindness he had shown others would ripple outward in ways he could never know, about the stories they would tell their future children, if they were blessed with any, about the brother who had taught them how to love more deeply. They told him about the way his absence would create space in their hearts, not an empty space, but a sacred one, a place where his memory would live and grow and change them for the better. They told him about the legacy of love he was leaving behind, not in grand gestures or dramatic accomplishments, but in the small, consistent choices he had made each day to be kind, to be brave, to be present. And they told him something they had not allowed themselves to believe until this moment. That death was not an ending, but a transformation. That love, once given, could never be taken away. That he would always be a part of their story, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. When they finished, the room was silent except for the soft hiss of the oxygen machine and the distant hum of the hospital at night. Oliver's eyes were closed, but a peaceful smile played at the corners of his mouth. And Rebecca and William knew, with a certainty that settled deep in their bones, that he had heard them. Not just with his ears, but with his heart. That he understood. That he was ready. Oliver left on an April morning when the world was soft with new green, and the oak tree outside his window wore its first pale leaves like promises kept. There was no struggle at the end, no dramatic final breath that demanded witness. Instead, there was a gradual softening, like a wave returning to ocean, like a sigh finding its home after a long journey. His parents sat on either side of the bed, their hands resting lightly on his, one palm upturned to receive, one palm downturned to release. The objects on the windowsill remained exactly as he had arranged them. Barnaby propped against the wall, Goodnight Moon opened the page with the old lady whispering hush, the alphabet blocks spelling his name in wobbly capitals, the tiny blue sneaker standing upright, the grey stone catching the morning light like a miniature moon. And in that moment, the room held not emptiness but fullness, a presence so palpable it seemed to thicken the air, to slow time itself. For 3 days after his departure, the objects on the windowsill remained untouched. Nurses entered room 11 to clean and prepare the room for its next occupant, but each one paused upon seeing the carefully arranged artifacts, each one sensing that some sacred process was still unfolding within that stillness. On the 4th day, Nurse Clara arrived with a small wooden plaque she had made herself during her days off, a simple rectangle of walnut stained to match the room's trim, with a single phrase burned into the wood in elegant script. "This is my window to childhood." She did not hang it beneath the windowsill. She simply placed it beside Barnaby, where morning light would touch it first. Then she sat in the chair by the window and waited. At noon, Rebecca and William arrived to collect their son's belongings. They had expected to feel the crushing weight of finality, to be overwhelmed by the emptiness of a room that no longer held their child's breath. But what they found instead was not emptiness but presence. The objects on the windowsill seemed to glow with a light that had nothing to do with the sun streaming through the glass. Barnaby's worn fur seemed softer than ever. The pages of Goodnight Moon seemed to hold more color. The grey stone seemed to pulse with a warmth that defied its mineral nature. And as Rebecca reached out to touch the tiny blue sneaker, she felt not the cold finality of loss, but the warm continuity of love. "We should take them home," William said softly. Rebecca shook her head. "He wouldn't want that," she said. "He arranged them here for a reason. He wanted them to stay." William considered this, his gaze moving from object to object, from memory to memory. He thought of the stories they had told in this room, of the love that had been spoken into existence each evening, of the way Oliver had used these simple objects to bridge the gap between his past and his present. And he understood what Rebecca meant. These objects were not just mementos to be stored in a box and occasionally revisited. They were vessels, carriers of stories, of memories, of love. And their purpose was not to be preserved in isolation, but to continue their work in the world. "Leave them," he said finally. "Let the next child find them." And so they did. They left the objects exactly as Oliver had arranged them, with the wooden plaque beside Barnaby and a single note tucked beneath the grey stone. These belonged to Oliver. He loved them deeply. Share their stories with whoever needs them. The next child to occupy room 11 was a girl named Lily, 7 years old, with eyes the color of twilight sky and a quiet intensity that reminded the seasoned nurses of someone they could almost remember but not quite place. Her parents, David and Sarah, moved through the hospital corridors with the stunned gait of people who had just been told the earth was flat after a lifetime of believing it round. They spoke in hushed tones, jumped at the sound of paging systems, flinched when doctors approached with clipboards. They were drowning in a sea of information, treatment options, prognosis statistics, clinical trial eligibility, but starving for meaning. On their second day in room 11, while Lily napped fitfully, Sarah noticed the objects on the windowsill. "Whose are these?" she asked David, her voice tight with the frustration of so many broken things in their lives lately. David started to call maintenance, but Nurse Clara entered just then with fresh linens. She saw the direction of their gaze and paused. "Those belong to Oliver," she said gently. "He lived in this room before Lily. He arranged them himself. Called it his window to childhood." Sarah looked at her, really looked, with eyes raw from sleepless nights and unshed tears. "What does that mean?" Clara did not explain Oliver's story. She did not tell the tale of the boy who had used simple objects to bridge the gap between his past and his present. She simply pointed to the wooden plaque beside Barnaby. He believed that when we look at the things we loved as children, we remember who we really are, she said. Not the sick person. The real person. The one who stays. She finished making the bed in silence, her movements imbued with a quality of reverence that Sarah could not name but could feel in her bones. When Clara left, Sarah did not call maintenance. She simply sat in the chair by the window and watched her daughter sleep, and for the first time since diagnosis, she did not try to calculate how many days they might have left. She simply inhabited the moment, looking at the teddy bear with its worn ears, the open book with its faded illustrations, the tiny blue sneaker standing upright like a monument to small feet, the grey stone catching the light like a promise. And something in her shifted, not healed, not fixed, but softened enough to allow a single honest breath. Lily woke an hour later to find her mother not staring at her with desperate love, but looking at the objects on the windowsill with a quietness that felt like peace. She followed her mother's gaze and saw what Sarah saw. Barnaby with his gentle smile, Goodnight Moon with its familiar illustrations, the alphabet blocks spelling a name that was not hers but felt somehow familiar, the tiny blue sneaker that made her think of her own small shoes at home, the grey stone that looked like the ones she collected from the creek behind their house. And without knowing why, Lily felt a small loosening in her chest, a sense that this room, with its carefully arranged objects and quiet light, might be a place where she could be exactly as she was without having to perform hope or bravery for anyone. That afternoon, during what might have been called the hour of afternoon light through new leaves, Lily reached for Barnaby. She did not ask permission. She simply picked him up and held him in the sunbeam cutting across her bed. Light caught his worn fur and seemed to warm it from within. She held him against her chest the way she had held her own teddy bear at home, and for the first time since arriving at the hospital, she felt a sense of safety that had nothing to do with medical expertise or treatment plans and everything to do with the simple, profound truth that some objects carry love within them like vessels carry water. "Mom," she said finally. "Who was Oliver?" Sarah looked up from her book. She glanced at the objects on the windowsill, then at her daughter's face softened by the teddy bear's presence. And for the first time, she did not feel the urge to protect Lily from the truth of what had happened in this room. She simply answered honestly. "He was a boy who lived here before you. He was brave. He was kind. He loved these things very much. And he left them here for you." Lily considered this for a long moment, her small fingers stroking Barnaby's worn ear. Why did he leave them? Sarah took a deep breath. This was the question she had been dreading, the question that would force her to acknowledge the reality of death to her daughter, to shatter the protective bubble she had been trying to maintain since diagnosis. But as she looked at Lily holding Barnaby, she understood that this was not a moment of shattering. It was a moment of connection. A bridge being built between two children who had never met but were linked by the universal language of love. "Because he knew someone else would need them," Sarah said softly. "He knew that when you looked at these things, you would remember who you really are. Not the sick girl. The real you. The one who stays." Lily nodded as if this were the most natural explanation in the world. She did not cry. She did not ask follow-up questions about where Oliver had gone or whether she would meet the same fate. She simply held Barnaby a little tighter and whispered, "I like this bear." And just like that, Oliver's window to childhood found its next keeper. Over the following weeks, Lily developed her own relationship with the objects on the windowsill. She did not replicate Oliver's arrangement exactly. Her temperament was different, her journey unique, but she adopted his fundamental insight. That the things we love as children carry within them the essence of who we are. She designated Barnaby as her guardian of dreams, placing him on her pillow each night to keep the nightmares away, just as Oliver had done years earlier. She read Goodnight Moon to herself each evening before sleep, her small finger tracing the illustrations as she whispered the words aloud. She rearranged the alphabet blocks to spell her own name, Lily, and added them to the collection with a sense of ownership that felt both respectful and necessary. She placed her own tiny shoe, a pink sneaker with glittery laces, beside Oliver's blue one, creating a pair that spanned time and circumstance. And she found her own grey stone from the hospital garden during a rare outing, and placed it beside Oliver's, creating a duo of treasures that spoke to the universality of childhood wonder. Her parents underwent their own transformation through this practice. David, a software engineer who had built his career on algorithms and predictable outcomes, found himself increasingly comfortable with ambiguity. He stopped calculating survival probabilities, a practice that had become a form of torture, and began noticing the particular texture of each day they were given. Some days were the hour of gentle effort. Some were the hour of quiet surrender. Some, surprisingly, were the hour of unexpected joy, when Lily laughed at a silly joke, or when sunlight hit the wall in just the right way to create a perfect rainbow through the water glass on her bedside table. David learned to inhabit these hours without trying to extend them or protect them from ending. He simply allowed them to be what they were, complete in themselves, sufficient without continuation. Sarah's work as a teacher shifted subtly but profoundly. She had always believed education was about imparting knowledge, facts to be memorized, skills to be mastered. But now she began understanding that the deepest learning happened not in the accumulation of information, but in the quality of attention brought to each moment. She designed lesson plans not around standardized metrics, but around emotional temporality, to how a classroom might support the hour of confusion before breakthrough, the hour of collaborative discovery, the hour of quiet reflection after new understanding dawns. Her students noticed the change. They called her class the place where time feels different. Sarah knew the truth. Her daughter had taught her that learning, like time, could not be forced, but it could be invited through presence. The practice of Oliver's window continued spreading through the East Wing, not as a formal program but as a quiet contagion of attention. Staff members began using the language without even realizing they had adopted it. "I think we're entering the hour of difficult news," a nurse might say before delivering test results, and her colleagues would adjust their posture, their tone, their presence accordingly. "This feels like the hour of small victories," another might observe after a child took 3 steps unassisted, and the entire team would pause to truly see the achievement rather than rushing to the next task. The objects on the windowsill of room 11 became a kind of landmark, not because they were valuable or rare, but because they invited those who looked upon them to ask a different question. Not what is wrong with this child, but who is this child beneath the illness? One afternoon in June, during what might have been called the hour of long shadows before sunset, the hospital's director of pastoral care, a woman named Miriam who had spent 30 years listening to the unspoken questions of the dying, approached Nurse Clara with an observation. "That window in room 11, she said. "It's become something more than decoration. Families request that room specifically now, not because they know Oliver's story, but because they sense something different happens there. Something about how childhood feels." Clara nodded. She had noticed the same phenomenon. Patient satisfaction scores for room 11 consistently outperformed other rooms on the wing, not because of better equipment or more attentive staff, but because of an intangible quality families described as peace or permission to just be. She had initially dismissed these reports as placebo effect or confirmation bias. But after witnessing the transformation in multiple families, including her own shift in how she moved through difficult conversations, she could no longer deny that something real was happening in that space. "We could make it official," Miriam suggested. "Create a program. Train staff in childhood preservation. Call it the Oliver method or something." Clara shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "The moment we formalize it, we kill it. This isn't a technique. It's a way of being. And ways of being can't be taught, they can only be caught." Miriam understood. She had spent her career watching well-intentioned programs become bureaucratic burdens, watching sacred practices lose their soul when reduced to checklists and metrics. Oliver's gift was too delicate for institutionalization. It needed to remain wild, passed hand to hand like a secret, discovered anew by each person who entered room 11 with an open heart. Instead, she began quietly preserving Oliver's legacy in subtler ways. She transcribed the stories his parents had told, the ones she had overheard through the doorway, the ones nurses had shared in staff meetings, the ones families had whispered to each other in the waiting room. She arranged for the objects on the windowsill to remain exactly as Oliver had left them, with a small note explaining their significance. These belonged to Oliver, who taught us that childhood is not something we leave behind, but something we carry within us always. She commissioned a local artist to create a watercolor of the windowsill, not in any single moment, but in all its iterations. Oliver's arrangement, Lily's additions, the shoes side by side, the stones glowing in the light. The painting hung in the family lounge of the East Wing, with Oliver's final words to his parents inscribed beneath it in elegant script. "I'm still that boy. I've just grown around him. 5 years after Oliver's passing, the hospital underwent renovations. The East Wing was modernized, new flooring, updated lighting, fresh paint in calming colors. Maintenance crews moved through the rooms replacing fixtures, updating electrical systems, installing energy-efficient windows. When they reached room 11, the foreman noted the objects on the windowsill and added them to his removal list. But before the crew could arrive, every nurse who worked the East Wing had signed a petition requesting the objects remain untouched. Dr. Evans added his signature. Miriam added hers. Even the hospital CEO, who had never met Oliver but had read about him in a staff wellness report, added his name to the list. The petition contained a single sentence. These objects measure a dimension of childhood that cannot be removed, only honored. The maintenance foreman, a practical man in his 50s who believed broken things should be fixed, read the petition and shook his head. But he also had a daughter who had spent 3 months in room 9 2 years earlier, a daughter who was now healthy and in college, but who still spoke of the magic of the East Wing's atmosphere. He thought of her. He thought of the petition signed by every nurse on the wing. And he made a decision. He climbed the ladder to the windowsill, examined each object carefully, and then descended without removing a single one. Objects are fine, he told his crew. Just need to keep their own time. And so the window remained, Barnaby propped against the wall. Goodnight Moon opened the page with the old lady whispering hush, the alphabet blocks spelling names that had come and gone, shoes standing side by side across time, stones glowing in the morning light. New families arriving in room 11 would notice them and sometimes ask why they weren't removed. Nurses would simply point to the wooden plaque and say, "This is a window to childhood." And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the question would work its magic, shifting attention from what was broken to what was possible, from illness as identity to childhood as essence. A boy named Leo, diagnosed with the same constellation of Latin terms that had shaped Oliver's final year, arrived in room 11 7 years after Oliver's passing. He was 8 years old, with eyes the color of twilight sky and a quiet intensity that reminded the seasoned nurses of someone they could almost remember but not quite place. His parents moved through the hospital corridors with the stunned gait of people who had just been told the earth was flat after a lifetime of believing it round. They spoke in hushed tones, jumped at the sound of paging systems, flinched when doctors approached with clipboards. They were drowning in a sea of information, treatment options, prognosis statistics, clinical trial eligibility, but starving for meaning. On his third day in room 11, during what might have been called the hour of afternoon light through summer leaves, Leo noticed the objects on the windowsill. "Whose are these?" he asked his mother. His mother started to explain, but Nurse Anya, who had been a junior nurse during Oliver's time and now served as head nurse of the wing, entered just then with his medication. "Those belong to Oliver," she said gently. "He lived here before you. He called this his window to childhood." Leo looked at her, really looked, with eyes too old for his face. "What does that mean?" Anya did not explain Oliver's story. She did not burden this child with another child's legacy. She simply pointed to the wooden plaque beside Barnaby. "It means that when you look at the things you loved as a child, you remember who you really are," she said. "Not the sick person. The real you. The one who stays." Leo considered this for a long moment, his gaze moving from object to object, from the teddy bear with its worn ears to the open book with its faded illustrations, from the alphabet blocks spelling names he did not know to the tiny shoes standing side by side across time, from the grey stones glowing in the morning light to the wooden plaque with its simple message. And he understood. Not with his intellect, but with his heart. This was not a museum of loss. This was a sanctuary of identity. A place where childhood was not something to be mourned or outgrown, but something to be carried forward like a lantern in the dark. He reached for Barnaby and held him in the sunbeam cutting across his bed. Light caught the bear's worn fur and seemed to warm it from within. Leo held him against his chest the way he had held his own teddy bear at home, and for the first time since arriving at the hospital, he felt a sense of safety that had nothing to do with medical expertise or treatment plans and everything to do with the simple, profound truth that some objects carry love within them like vessels carry water. "I like this bear," he whispered. And just like that, Oliver's window to childhood found its next voice, not as repetition, but as continuation. Not as memory, but as living practice. The objects were not his to keep. They were always meant to be passed hand to hand like a candle flame, diminished not at all by the sharing, but multiplied into light enough for everyone. 10 years after Oliver's passing, the East Wing of the hospital had become known informally as the wing with the window to childhood. Families specifically requested rooms there, not because outcomes were better, statistics showed no significant difference in survival rates, but because something about the atmosphere allowed them to inhabit their difficult journeys with more grace, more presence, more capacity for noticing beauty even in the smallest spaces. Staff retention on the wing was notably higher than other departments. Nurses spoke of the Room 11 effect, not as superstition, but as observable phenomenon. Families who spent time in that particular room seemed better able to navigate grief without being destroyed by it, to hold hope without clinging desperately to false promises, to be present with their children in ways that honored both the reality of illness and the reality of love. The objects on the windowsill of Room 11 had become a quiet landmark, not officially recognized by hospital administration, but deeply respected by everyone who worked the East Wing. New nurses were not trained in Oliver's method. They simply absorbed the practice through osmosis, watching senior staff pause before entering a room to truly see the child within, hearing colleagues use phrases like the real you or the one who stays without explanation, noticing how families who spent time in Room 11 gradually shifted from focusing on illness to focusing on identity. The objects themselves had acquired a patina of age, the teddy bear's fur darkened to the color of old honey, the book's pages slightly yellowed with years of handling, the wooden blocks worn smooth at the edges by countless small hands. But they remained exactly as Oliver had arranged them, with additions from each child who had passed through the room. Shoes standing side by side across time, stones glowing in the morning light, notes tucked beneath objects with messages of love and hope. One autumn afternoon, during what might have been called the hour of golden light before rain, a woman in her late 30s entered Room 11 pushing an empty wheelchair. Her name was Rebecca, Oliver's mother. She had not returned to this room since the day she and William had left their son's belongings on the windowsill, trusting that they would find their way to whoever needed them next. 10 years had passed. She had built a new life, not a replacement for the old one, but an expansion of it. She and William had adopted a daughter, now 8 years old, who knew Oliver not as a ghost haunting their family but as a big brother whose short life had taught them how to love more deeply. Rebecca's work as a teacher had flourished, her lessons increasingly focused on helping children connect with their own inner selves, the parts of them that remained constant even as circumstances changed. She had published a book called The Window Within that had become required reading in several education programs. But she had never returned to Room 11. Until today. The room was empty, between occupants, awaiting cleaning before the next family arrived. Rebecca had arranged the visit weeks in advance, explaining to the hospital administrator that she needed to see the space one more time. She did not say why. She did not need to. She stood just inside the doorway, her hand resting lightly on the wheelchair's handle as if steadying herself. The room was both exactly as she remembered and completely different. The bed was made with fresh linens. The 4 poles stood in the corner, polished and ready. The window looked out on the same oak tree, larger now, its branches stretching wider, its roots deeper, but wearing the same autumn fire she remembered from Oliver's final days. And on the windowsill, The objects remained exactly as Oliver had arranged them a decade earlier. Barnaby propped against the wall. Goodnight Moon opened the page with the old lady whispering hush, the alphabet blocks spelling his name in wobbly capitals, the tiny blue sneaker standing upright, the grey stone catching the morning light like a miniature moon. Beside them stood additions from children who had come after. A pink sneaker with glittery laces, a smooth white stone from a hospital garden, a note tucked beneath the grey stone that read, "Thank you, Oliver. You helped me remember who I am." Rebecca did not move for a long time. She simply stood and breathed the air of this room, the air her son had breathed, the air that had held his laughter and his pain, his questions and his silences. She noticed the wooden plaque on the windowsill, "This is my window to childhood," and felt a small loosening in her chest. Someone had preserved this. Someone had understood. She walked slowly to the window and placed her hands on the sill where Oliver's objects had rested for so many months. The objects were still there, still holding space, still telling stories, still bridging the gap between past and present, between childhood and whatever comes after. She did not touch them. She simply looked at them, really looked, with eyes that had spent a decade learning to see beyond loss to legacy. And she understood something fundamental about her son's gift. It was not about preserving memories of who he had been. It was about affirming the truth that childhood is not something we leave behind when we grow up or face illness or approach death. It is something we carry within us always, a core of wonder, of curiosity, of love that remains constant even as everything else changes. Oliver had not been trying to escape his present reality by retreating into childhood. He had been trying to anchor himself in his essential self, the part of him that illness could not touch, that death could not erase. She turned and looked at the objects again. 10 years ago, they had felt like a cruel metaphor, reminders of a childhood cut short, of a life that would never reach its full potential. Now she saw them differently. They were not stuck in the past. They were alive in the present. They were vessels carrying Oliver's essence forward, not as memory alone, but as changed substance, like bread becoming body, like grief becoming compassion, like childhood becoming wisdom. Before leaving, Rebecca glanced once more at the windowsill. And she answered the question that had guided her son's final months. "Who are you, really?" She considered the room, the empty bed waiting for its next occupant, the oak tree outside wearing autumn fire, the objects on the windowsill glowing in the afternoon light, the notes tucked beneath stones with messages of love and hope from children she had never met but whose lives had been touched by her son. She considered her own journey, the years of grief that had gradually softened into warm sorrow, the adoption of her daughter who carried Oliver's capacity for wonder in her own unique way, the work she had built from his legacy without ever exploiting it. She considered the countless families who had passed through this room in the decades since Oliver's passing, each one bringing their own pain, their own hope, their own particular childhood needing to be remembered and honored. And she answered honestly, "I am still that boy. I've just grown around him." She did not say this with sadness. She said it with the quiet certainty of someone who had lived long enough to witness a truth her son had known instinctively. That we do not lose our younger selves as we grow. We carry them with us, like seeds within fruit, waiting for the right conditions to sprout again. Oliver had not been lost. He had been transformed, becoming memory, becoming story, becoming the objects on this windowsill that continued to tell his truth to whoever needed to hear it. And in that transformation, he had become more than he had been in life, not because he had achieved fame or fortune or recognition, but because he had touched hearts in ways he could never have imagined. Rebecca left room 11 without looking back. But she carried its stillness with her, not as burden, but as gift. And when she returned home that evening and found her daughter curled on the sofa with a book, sunlight catching the curve of her cheek just so, Rebecca did not check the clock on the wall. She simply sat beside her daughter, placed a hand on her shoulder, and inhabited the moment she was in, the moment of ordinary grace, and discovered it was more than enough. The objects on the windowsill of room 11 remain exactly as Oliver arranged them to this day. They have not been removed. They have not been replaced. They have simply been allowed to keep their own time, a time measured not in minutes but in meaning, not in duration but in depth. New families arriving in the room still notice them and sometimes ask why they aren't removed. Nurses still point to the wooden plaque and say, "This is a window to childhood." And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the question works its magic, shifting attention from what is broken to what is possible, from illness as identity to childhood as essence. Children who pass through room 11 still add their own objects to the collection, some echoing Oliver's original choices, some entirely their own invention. A girl named Sophia added a seashell she had collected on her last beach trip before diagnosis. A boy named Matteo added a tiny wooden car his grandfather had carved for him. A teenager named Chloe, facing a prognosis no one would speak aloud, added a pressed flower from her mother's garden with a note that read, "This is who I am. Not what is happening to me." These objects are not recorded in medical charts. They are not measured by outcomes. They simply exist, as real as breath, as necessary as light. The window continues to serve its purpose, not as a museum of loss, but as a sanctuary of identity. It reminds everyone who enters that childhood is not something to be mourned or outgrown, but something to be carried forward like a lantern in the dark. It teaches parents to see their children not as patients or diagnoses, but as whole human beings with histories and personalities and loves that existed before illness and will continue to exist after. It teaches staff to approach their work not just with clinical competence, but with human connection, to see the child behind the illness, the person behind the patient. And it teaches children themselves that they are more than their circumstances, that they carry within them a core of wonder and love and identity that cannot be touched by anything outside themselves. Oliver's parents visit the hospital once a year, not on the anniversary of his death, but on the first day of spring, when the oak tree outside room 11 wears its full cloak of green and sunlight streams through the window in thick golden beams. They do not enter the room. They simply stand in the courtyard beneath the tree, their hands touching lightly, and look up at the window where their son learned to anchor himself in his essential self. They do not speak of grief or loss. They speak of the objects on the windowsill and the children who have added to them over the years. They speak of the notes tucked beneath stones with messages of love and hope. They speak of the families who have found comfort in that room, who have been reminded of who they really are beneath the illness. They speak of ordinary moments made sacred by attention. The hour of morning coffee shared in silence, the hour of watching their daughter ride a bike for the first time, the hour of stars visible through their own bedroom window. And always, before leaving the courtyard, they look up at the window one last time and answer the question Oliver taught them to ask. "Who are you, really?" And they answer together, their voices blending like harmonies in a song they have practiced for a decade. "I am still that boy. I've just grown around him." For this is the quiet truth Oliver embodied in his short life. We do not lose our younger selves as we grow. We carry them with us, like seeds within fruit, waiting for the right conditions to sprout again. Childhood is not something we leave behind when we face illness or loss or the inevitability of death. It is something we carry within us always, a core of wonder, of curiosity, of love that remains constant even as everything else changes. And in that truth lives not consolation for loss, but celebration of continuity, a continuity no boundary of breath or time can ever sever. The objects remain on the windowsill. The stories continue to be told. And in that paradox lives not the end of childhood, but its eternal presence, waiting in teddy bears and storybooks, in alphabet blocks and tiny shoes, in grey stones catching the morning light, in the hearts of everyone who has ever been a child and everyone who will ever be one again. Always. And so the table remains. Not as a memorial to a life that was cut short, but as a celebration of a life that was fully lived. Its wooden surface holds not just the marks of countless hands that have rested upon it, but the imprints of countless hearts that have found healing around it. Its chairs hold not just the weight of bodies that have sat in them, but the presence of souls that have been touched by connection. And its space holds not just the air that has been shared within it, but the love that has been breathed into it, over and over again, evening after evening, year after year. Noah never knew his table would become a sanctuary for so many others. He simply asked for it because in that moment, it was all he needed, a way to break the isolation that had been weighing on him, a way to create connection in a place that felt disconnected, a way to remind himself and everyone around him that we are not meant to walk alone. But in asking, he gave the world a profound gift. The understanding that healing is not something that happens to us, but something we create together. That community is not something we find, but something we build. That love is not something we receive, but something we give. And that even in the midst of suffering, even in the shadow of loss, we can create spaces where healing and connection can flourish. If this story touched something in you tonight, if it reminded you of a table waiting to be filled, or a community waiting to be built, carry that truth into tomorrow. Look for the spaces in your own life where isolation has taken root. And ask yourself, what table can I create? What space can I open? What connection can I foster? Share this with someone who needs to remember. We are not meant to walk alone. We are meant to gather, to share, to be present with one another in the ordinary, extraordinary moments of life. If these words brought you peace, consider subscribing to Children Who Changed How We Live. Here we do not avoid life's hardest moments. We meet them softly and discover the light waiting within them. Before you go, close your eyes for just one breath. Ask yourself gently, where is my table? Who is waiting to sit with me? And carry that question with you into the night, not as burden, but as invitation to create connection wherever you are. You are seen. You are held. And the tables you create will hold others long after you are gone. Until we meet again in the quiet. Walk gently,